Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a quick look at the Asus X Noctua 5080 OC edition. Inside the box, you have the card itself, a Velcro strap, a 16-pin adapter that branches out to 8 3-pins, as well as a Noctua themed GPU stand. Taking a closer look at the GPU, you'll see that it carries traditional brown and beige Noctua colors. However, unlike the previous dual fan solutions, the new Noctua 5080 has a triple fan solution, which features a new vapor chamber that has 7 8mm and 4 6mm heat pipes. The fans on the card are actually Noctua NF-A12x G2s, running at different speeds to reduce humming and vibration. The side fans are PPA, running at 50 RPM slower, and the middle one is PPB, running 50 RPM faster. For those of you that are curious, this is the same PCB as the TUF 5080. However, the heatsink is completely different and significantly larger. So, given the larger heatsink and the specially tuned fans, let's compare it against an Astral 5080 as well as the regular Founders Edition 5080. I think it's fair to assume that you would get the best noise and temperature on the Noctua, but let's see. Now, to get an idea of cooler performance as well as overall fan noise and fan speed, what I decided to do was run each card through OCCT extreme GPU stress for about 10 minutes. Now, during this time period, my ambient was about 19.5 C, which is fairly cool, okay, given that it is fall, winter in the Northeast. All of these cards were ran at the stock default voltage, so while the Noctua can go up to 450 watts, the Asus can go up to 480 watts, and the Founders just kind of stuck at 350. They were all run at stock settings. So, contrary to my expectations, the Noctua on average actually was a little bit warmer than the Astral. Now, according to Noctua, it's actually cooler than the Astral, but I think that really depends on probably the fan curve that they set. I have all these running on the default fan curve, all right? So they're both on performance for both. The Astral and the Noctua. Now, the Founders Edition is way out there. But what this graph does not show you is the actual noise level. The Astral was noticeably louder than the Noctua, and the FE just sounded like a jet engine, which I will show you guys in a moment when I show you their fan speeds and correlated noise levels. Quick note about the setup. So I have a decibel meter pointed 160 millimeters from the center of the GPU. This is the same setup I'm going to be using across all 3 GPUs. Now, these clips aren't perfect, but essentially I am speeding the fan up to 35%, letting it come back down to 0, then speeding it back to 65%, letting it come back down to 0, and then speeding up to 100% and coming back down to 0. Now, if you watch the clips, you'll see that it does kind of reach a certain peak dBA, and then it drops again. That's because the fan is slowing back down. Now, I've noticed with the Noctua, pretty much there is no real audible difference between 35 and 65. While 100% is audible, I would say in a room with the case door on, in my case I have the mesh case door, you're not going to notice a difference. Even at 100%, it's going to be not very noticeable in the whole entire system. So moving on to the Astral, at the low fan percentage, or 35%, it's pretty much the same as the Noctua. As it climbs through the range, it gets more and more audible. Now, I've had the Astral cards for quite some time, so I have a lot of experience with them. And I can tell you that if you're using them on air, you're going to hear them inside of a case, especially during the summertime. Once this card's fan starts ramping up to 70% plus, it's extremely audible. At 100%, this fan was hitting 70 dBA on the decibel meter. That is almost 20 dBA louder than the Noctua at 100% compared to 100%. Moving on to the Founders Edition, this card has only 2 fans compared to the 3 fan and the 4 fan setup on the Astral. For those of you that are not aware, there's a rear fan on the Astral that runs in reverse. So you see that at the Astral with 4 fans at 100% is hitting 70, while the FE with 2 fans is hitting 67, 68. So that really comes down to fan design, right? As well as maximum fan speed. After this, I'm going to show you guys a chart of the average fan speed, but that's not exactly apples to apples because every card uses different fans, right? But as you can see here, the FE and the Astral both running at 100% is obviously hard to kind of differentiate because they're both really loud. But once again, temperature wise, it is a very huge gap. So here I have a chart of the average fan speed according to OCCT for all the cards during that 10-minute period-ish during the stress test. As you can see, the Astral actually has the least average fan speed in terms of RPM, but it is definitely not as quiet as the Noctua was. And the FE was obviously the highest RPM and also the most audible. So before I wrap up the video, it's my conclusion thoughts. Quick things about the build. What you're seeing at the bottom for the power supply cover, that is 2 3mm wood sheets that have been cut into shape and also pocketed, logoed into shape, and then kind of just adhesive onto the factory PSU cover. They're obviously cut precisely to fit into a perfect rectangle, and that's what I have going on down there. Moving on to the CPU block, I am using a Revo stealth water cooling block, but I do have a custom cover over it. The cover is actually not wood, it is actually wood PLA. What I've done is I've taken that wood PLA 3D print and I've sliced it with a wood texture and bamboo slicer. So when it prints out, it kind of has that kind of wood unevenness grain look. And then I sanded that a little bit. I put a layer of varnish, and that's kind of how it looks the way it looks. It looks kind of woodish, but at the same time also kind of looks like a little bit like leather vinyl. But I have made a couple of them, and some of the other ones were a little more convincing, but unfortunately those are Intel. I pretty much originally planned to use an Intel board. Additionally, in the rear, that's probably the most exciting item for a lot of folks, I think. That is not something that Noctua sells. That is a custom screen holder. What I did was I catted the original A12 fans, and then I kind of just extended the middle and made a hole in it so it can kind of have a screen go through it. And to kind of make it look more realistic, I also put in the elements that I'm using actual Noctua fan bumpers along all the corners. That kind of gives it that look. For those of you that are curious, the filament I'm using is Inland Army Beige and Matte and Inland Matte Brown, and I find those to match Noctua colors pretty well. As for the GPU stand at the bottom, I just took, recatted the logo, printed it out. I know some folks are curious about it. It is actually 27mm tall, so it's not something that's very generic you can use. In my case, my GPU is 27mm to the top of the power supply cover, so that works out perfectly for me. So in conclusion, I like the card. I think it's very well built. I can see the Noctua intentions in it. From a noise perspective, having a card that runs 100% fan, sounding like a 50 to 40% fan speed on another GPU is extremely impressive. It's large, it's beefy, and if you're a Noctua fan, this is definitely something that's going to be in your boat. At the price point of $1,600, it is high, and it is $50 to $100 within the Astral. If the Astral goes back to its launch price, it's pretty much the same price as the Astral. The Astral with the 16-bit monitoring is kind of something I would lean towards, right? But I'm not a very big Noctua fan, right? Not that I can't appreciate this GPU and how well it's put together. But at the same time, I would say that if you're looking to purchase a 5080 and you're not looking to spend a lot of money, the base models are probably still the way to go. But keep in mind, if you're in the market for these things now, I would buy them now. Because unless you haven't been paying attention to world economic news or the tech sector, there's a lot of heavy investment in data center right now. And because of that investment, there is an IC shortage. And that IC shortage has already affected memory prices where it's doubled. It's already affected storage prices where it's about 40 to 50% higher than previous, and it's going up. And whether you like to remember it or not, GPUs also use VRAM, right? So GPU prices are bound to stay stagnant or go up, especially for models that use more memory, right? So if you take a look on Newegg right now, you probably see there's less 5090s. If you look at Microcenter.com, you probably notice there's less 5090s available, and that prices have slowly started creeping up again. So with that said, thanks for watching. Stay safe and take care.